Hello, this is Alan Henderson, Executive Director of NATS, and welcome to this webinar on NATS student audition adjudications. With over 10,000 students singing in NATS student auditions every year, and that number is growing, it's never more important than to ensure that we're doing the very best job we can as adjudicators in adjudicating our students, and that we can ensure that our colleagues also are doing a great job of adjudicating our students who prepare so hard to participate in NATS student auditions. As we begin this webinar, you might want to have two documents handy and available to you. NATS Auditions Rubric and the NATS Student Auditions Adjudication Form. If you don't have them available to you, they can easily be found on the NATS website at nats.org. by clicking on the Competitions tab, clicking under National Student Auditions, and clicking on the NSA Resource Center link. This resource page is put together to provide all the documents that you need to reference relative to student auditions. There's a copy of the National Student Audition Regulations. Here's a link to the rubric you need. There's also several versions of an adjudication form. You can access any one of those. There's also a link to this video and some other videos, including an introduction to the NATS student auditions, some information on media release templates and logos that you may need to use, and some frequently asked questions document, one that's coming soon on student auditions and another that already exists on the national level of student auditions. Let's first take a look at our rubric. Now, many of us are familiar with the use of rubrics in a variety of settings. A rubric helps us establish unified expectations for various levels of performance. It helps us create a standard for comparison rather than comparing singers one to another. And it clarifies for adjudicators, teachers, and the singer what exactly is being evaluated in the audition. It's important that we as adjudicators familiarize ourselves with the language that's included in this rubric prior to attending the audition stay. This really should be familiar enough to us that we just use it as a reference. We have it there, but we're not spending a lot of time referring to it in each audition that we hear. Important is to refer to several things. First of all, in the grade column, you find the standard. Notice the several areas that we are considering: tone, breathing and alignment, language and diction, musicianship, artistry and expression, and ensemble. I'll comment about the comment only statement there in a moment under ensemble. Each category has a statement which states the standard of what we expect in a performance. Let's take breathing and alignment, for instance. Inhalation is easy, full, and efficient. Exhalation provides stability, support, vibrancy, and vocal energy. Buoyant alignment assists a balanced engagement of the tone. Then across the page, you'll find three columns. The lowest column, 70 to 79, average, 80 to 89, and best, 90 to 100. Each of these boxes contain language that associates with the standard and defines the level at which that performance is. If we have a student who is not all the time consistent in this area of breathing and alignment, perhaps it's mostly easy and sufficient inhalation. Exhalation provides stability and support some of the time with some collapsing of the body at the ends. We might want to rate that student in the 80 to 89 range for breathing and alignment. We'll talk about how this corresponds to the adjudication sheet in just a moment. You'll notice that there's similar language of using descriptors like some of the time, etc. in each of the columns. Let's take a moment to look at the music theater rubric. You'll notice that in the music theater rubric, we have similar language under standard. Notice that because of some of the vocalisms that are used in music theater singing, we have a little bit more descriptive language about belt, mix, and legit. And then we have similar other language relative to the other areas that are applicable to the music theater categories. Note the statement up at the top. As adjudicators hear singers, they should compare the singer's performance against the general standard for the category they are adjudicating. Now, obviously, when we're talking about breathing and alignment in a student, if I'm judging a high school student, I don't have exactly the same expectations of what is easy inhalation, full and efficient, and stable exhalation and support, etc., for a high school man that I do for an advanced level man. And so our expectations should shift, and one thing it helps us to say is to look at the explanation in any box and add to the end of that for a high school male or whatever, insert whatever category you're judging, so that you begin to associate not only the standard, but make that standard relevant to the category you're adjudicating. Let's take a look at the auditions form. You'll note that in the auditions form, yours will be customized with your chapter, district, or region name. It's a place for the singer's name or number, depending on how your entity manages students' names or numbers. Their category, a box to check if they're singing for comments only. And I recommend that if you see that box checked, you confirm that with the student as they enter the room. And also, just go ahead and put a big X in the score box so that you don't forget and accidentally score them. Now, the next section of the adjudication form, you may have an adjudication form that has the repertoire printed in here already. Also, you'll find that our areas that are on the rubric are listed here with a dotted line that's divided into 3 sections corresponding to the lowest, the average, and the high range of our rubric. It was decided so that there was not an overemphasis on numbers, that adjudicators would not place any numbers in this section, but simply place an X on the line relative to a student's attainment in each of these areas. And while you won't see X's appear, you'll see blue boxes appear. I would be marking an X in each of these on my student's adjudication form. Notice that all my blue boxes occurred in the top third, which is corresponding to the 90 to 100. So my score should be at the bottom in the 90 range. And I would sign and date that form. There's ample room for comments. Of course, the back of the sheet can also be used. Now, if I rated a student in tone and breathing and alignment in the upper range, and perhaps in the other 3, I might rank them somewhere in the 80s, that likely would indicate that this student would be rated in the probably upper third of the 80s, somewhere in the 87, 88, 89 range. So make sure that once you've rated the student and placed your X's, that your overall score corresponds to the marks that you've made on the lines. Obviously, if I were to rate a student low here in several areas, we would not want to see on a form an overall score in the 90s. Now, ensemble is written for comment only because many students use a staff accompanist, and it was felt that it was not fair to have a score that affected the overall score of a student in the ensemble areas. The committee felt strongly that that aspect should be commented on and rated. It just should not factor into the overall score of the student. Lastly today, let's talk about the regulations document very quickly. You'll find on page 10 of that some more information about the auditions and rating and scoring system. While this document is comprehensive and several pages long, I encourage you to understand various aspects of that so that you understand how those who are running your auditions in your chapter or your entity are following these regulations and how that affects how your auditions may have changed. I know that if you're like me, you may have to make some adjustments in the way you adjudicate this year relative to how you've adjudicated in the past. And there are things that I will have to do different as I adjudicate this fall. One of those, I think, that's probably the most common thing is often when I would hear students, I would kind of get my sheets in order as I'm going through the auditions by hearing a student, and then the next student comes in, I fill out their form, and I tell myself, well, is that next person better or worse than the person before? And I start ordering my forms that way often. With the new way of adjudicating and realizing that I have to compare each student to the standard and not to one another, I really need to abandon that system and rethink the way I'm adjudicating students so that I'm really rating everyone against the standard. Now, there are two things that we all deal with in the adjudication room that sometimes can present problems or conflicts that we have to deal with. Those, of course, relate to copyright policy and repertoire violations. And I quickly want to remind us all that there are many legal ways to acquire music that don't result in a bound score. You're aware of some of those from our NATS copyright policy. We do allow purchase music online with proof, etc. Many of these things are being taken care of before students come into the audition room and are being verified prior to that. And if they are, that's really great for you as an adjudicator. If you suspect a problem in either copyright or a repertoire issue, and remember that many repertoire categories are changing this year, and so you're going to have to be very careful about thinking about past ways in which repertoire was constructed. The most important thing we can do in these situations is not interrupt the student's ability to have the best audition possible. And so if you suspect either of these things happening, the best thing for you to do is not disrupt the audition process to question the student. Don't write anything on a comment sheet. Please write things, your questions, etc., on a separate sheet of paper. Write the comments and score the student as if there were no violation. Rank them and score them as if there was no violation. And when the auditions are completed and you go to the tally room, discuss the issue with the auditions chair. The auditions chair may need to research the issue or consult others before making a final ruling. If it's determined that a violation exists, the auditions chair makes every effort to talk to the student's teacher prior to talking to the student. And this should be done by the auditions chair and not by the adjudicators themselves. And I also want to remind you to be extremely careful when these kinds of situations come up relative to your discussion outside the tally room. Sometimes conversations happen out in the halls, and we don't know who's standing around. It could be the student, their best friend, their teacher, or another. And if we're talking about an issue that may or may not be a problem, this can cause other problems and other conflicts. So I encourage you to be careful about that. If in fact there is a violation, of course the student will be disqualified. I'm happy to say that this happens less and less because we are developing better systems for verifying repertoire. People are following guidelines much more carefully. And we really do want to make sure that the audition experience is uninterrupted, both for the student who's singing and their collaborative pianist. We really want to respect our collaborative pianists and the service they provide our students, and the wonderful artistry that they contribute to fine performances in NATS student auditions. If you do have a question about photocopies or unbound music, at the end of the audition you can ask to see the music. I recommend to my students when they walk in the room, if they're using one of these forms of music, that they simply state when they walk in that just wanted to let you know that I have an IMSLP score, or I have a CD sheet music score, or I have purchased this piece from one of the online vendors, and offer to show that to the adjudicators. It really alleviates the problem, settles usually any issues prior to the adjudication beginning. I hope that this short tutorial has been beneficial for you. I hope that if you have any questions about any aspects of it, you will feel free to contact me at the NATS office or by email at allen, A-L-L-E-N, @nats.org. You can also contact Dan Johnson-Wilmot, the coordinator of NATS student auditions. His email address is on the NATS website as well. And we wish for you all the very best this year in NATS student adjudications. We hope that this new process, while we know it'll take time for you to reorient yourself, we feel that it's really a quality process, and we know that it's going to improve and provide even better feedback for our students and for those who teach them. Thank you very much.